Welcome back to Views with Hughes, your gender-free news. This is Jerome Hughes. Now, let's go ahead and get right into it. Now, this is the question that we've all been wondering. You see, Kathleen Kennedy is still Lucasfilm, and even people working for Disney are wondering, why the heck is Kathleen Kennedy still there? Now, before we begin, I do ask you to smash the like button and help this video get out there to more people, and subscribe to the channel for more pop culture updates. All right, so we're going to go ahead and get right into it. The ongoing saga of Kathleen Kennedy's leadership at Lucasfilm has now confused a lot of people. Now, if you're a Star Wars fan, this isn't just, another headline. This is about the future of the culture icon Star Wars, a legacy that spans generations, and how it has been handled or mishandled under Kathleen Kennedy's watch. Okay, but the issue is here. Remember, the Acolyte was supposed to be the next big thing for Star Wars, but unfortunately, guess what? The Acolyte's canceled, and it's supposed to be a new direction that would captivate audiences and reignite the magic of the franchise. But what happened? Well, it bombed. Disney Plus had the Acolyte canceled after just one season. You'd think that after so many years at the helm, Kathleen Kennedy would have figured out what makes Star Wars tick. But here we are again with another misfire on Kathleen Kennedy's record. Okay, and that shouldn't even be no surprise. Now, we have also Matt Maloney from Puck, who also did some investigative work, and surprise, surprise, well, nobody at Disney seems to know why Kathleen Kennedy is still in charge. Now, he also got responses like, well, Kathleen Kennedy was George Lucas's choice, but let's be honest here, people. That excuse is wearing thin now, and George Lucas may have chosen Kathleen Kennedy back in the day, but that was actually over a decade ago. Now, the world has changed, Star Wars has changed, and sadly, not for the better under the leadership of Kathleen Kennedy. Now, we're also going to talk about how George Lucas himself for a moment, how this man is the creator of the Star Wars, the visionary who also helped to bring this universe to life. Now, when he speaks, we should all be listening. And what did he say back in May? Well, he told an audience at the Cannes festival that Kathleen Kennedy lost the ideas that he had for Star Wars. And think about that for a second. That's nothing new right there. The man who understands Star Wars since he created it better than anyone says the ideas and the essence, the very soul of Star Wars has been lost under the tenure of Kathleen Kennedy. Now, that should set off a lot of alarm bells in everybody. And unfortunately, this is no surprise. But Lucas also went on to explain that, he was the one who truly knew what Star Wars was all about, because he was the one who created it. He understood the Force. He the intricate lore, the depth of the characters, the world building that made Star Wars so special in the first place. But when Kathleen Kennedy took over, much of that was cast aside. You see, Kathleen Kennedy had the chance to carry forward Lucas's vision to build on the foundation he laid, but instead, Kathleen Kennedy just simply chose a different path, a path that has led to the dilution of what made Star Wars great in the first place. So in other words, it's not Star Wars anymore. Okay, yeah, y'all remember The Force Awakens, approved by Kathleen Kennedy. Now, yes, by numbers, it was box office success, but was it really Star Wars, or was it just a rehash of old ideas, a nostalgia trip designed to play it safe? George Lucas himself referred to it as retro filmmaking. He wasn't even impressed, and neither were many of us who grew up with the original trilogy. Now, Lucas even went on so far to compare selling Star Wars to Disney to selling his kids to slavers, okay, as he called them, white slavers. And that's just not a throwaway comment. That's a gut-wrenching admission of regret. And it speaks volumes about how he feels about Kathleen Kennedy's stewardship of his beloved Star Wars creation. And to the point where he sees and admits that Kathleen Kennedy ruined it. Now, for years, we've been hearing rumors that Kathleen Kennedy is on her way out. Any day now, Kathleen Kennedy will be replaced. But we're still here nearly 5 years later, and Kathleen Kennedy is still calling the shots. And in that time, what has happened? To Star Wars itself as a brand, it's continued to decline. And back in 2022, Business Insider also ran a piece practically begging Bob Iger to step in and do something, anything to steer Star Wars back on course. But did he? Obviously not. Now, the last Star Wars movie we got was The Rise of Skywalker back in 2019, and we're not even getting another one until 2026. That's a 7-year gap right there, people. 7 years of cinematic inactivity for a franchise that should be dominated box office every few years. Why? Because Kathleen Kennedy, this lady, has ruined it. And let's also talk about what's supposedly coming down the pipeline with Kathleen Kennedy and Lucasfilm, okay? Now, there's a planned trilogy from Rian Johnson, the man behind The Last Jedi, who ruined the franchise, a film that divided the fan base like no other. Originally announced in 2017, it's now in the back burner. And Johnson still hopes to make it, but Kathleen Kennedy at the helm, while she's still there, I mean, we wouldn't be really optimistic. And then there's other projects from filmmakers like Sharmeen Obaid-Chinoy, James Mangold, Sean Levy, and even Patty Jenkins. But do any of these projects scream major success under Kathleen Kennedy's leadership? They don't really inspire much confidence, and that right there should concern people at Lucasfilm and Disney. But we're going to also take a step back to look at the bigger picture. For 13 years, Kathleen Kennedy has been at the helm of Lucasfilm, okay? Now, that's a long time by any standard, if you ask me. And during that time, Kathleen Kennedy has also faced the wrath of the fan base, especially with the recent trilogy of the films from Disney sequels that many feel have distorted and rewritten the lore of Star Wars. But the question is, why is Kathleen Kennedy still in charge? Why hasn't Disney brought George Lucas back into the fold, even as a creative consultant? Now, it seems like a no-brainer where Lucas is the mastermind behind the ideas that made Star Wars a cultural phenomenon. They did that with The Mandalorian first 2 seasons, but if Disney really cared about the franchise's future, they'd at least considered bringing him back on board, as well as giving Kathleen Kennedy less leeway. But let's not forget, the best Star Wars movie we've had since Kathleen Kennedy took over or took control was Rogue One. All right. And what do we know about that production? It was an absolute headache for Disney. And there were reshoots, there was chaos, but in the end, we got a film that captured the spirit of Star Wars. OK, and guess who liked it? George Lucas. That should tell you something right there. You see, when Lucas approves of the Star Wars film, you know it's like something was done right. But unfortunately, that kind of magic has been surely or sorely missing in the other projects released under Kathleen Kennedy and her watch. Okay. And the fact of the matter is, a lot of people are wondering why she's still there, even people who work there. Now, while other Disney studios like Marvel, Pixar, Disney Pictures, even 20th Century Studios enjoying the resurgence, Lucasfilm under Kathleen Kennedy continues to flounder. And it's the only Disney studio that hasn't had any major success in recent years. Now, what we have been getting instead was a string of Disney Plus shows that, well, let's be honest, have been met with lukewarm reviews and also declining viewership. Now, these different shows are a far cry from the cinematic masterpieces that made Star Wars a household name, but instead, thanks to Kathleen Kennedy, instead of expanding the universe in meaningful ways, they've often looked like filler, content for the sake of content, rather than stories worth telling, thanks to Kathleen Kennedy. And now, with the cancellation of the Acolyte under Kathleen Kennedy's watch, Star Wars is in more trouble than ever. You know, the future slate of projects doesn't really inspire much hope for a lot of people. Some people looking forward to Skeleton Crew, but they don't have the same buzz, the same excitement, the same promise of the success that we were seeing with other upcoming films like Deadpool and Wolverine, or even Inside Out 2. And longtime Star Wars fans are also checking out the franchise as well, and the interest is at an all-time low. Now, it's a sad state of affairs that for a franchise that once captivated the imaginations of millions since the 70s, okay? But we're going to also get deeper into why this is happening. You see, under Kathleen Kennedy, there's been a shift away from the foundational elements that made Star Wars resonate with audiences in the first place. You see, the original Star Wars trilogy was more than just a space opera. It was a story of good versus evil, a hope in the face of darkness, of heroism and sacrifice. It was grounded in timeless themes that spoke to people across generations. But what have we seen under Kathleen Kennedy? Well, under Kathleen Kennedy, we've seen a series of films and shows that often felt disconnected from the original version, more concerned with ticking off woke diversity boxes than telling a compelling story. Okay. And You can find that example in The Last Jedi, for instance. You see, Rian Johnson's film was praised by some for subverting expectations by putting more woke stuff in there, but for many fans, it felt like a betrayal of the characters and the lore. Luke Skywalker, the hero inspired by millions, was reduced to a cynical, defeated old man. And the Force, once a mystical energy that required discipline and training to harness, was just all of a sudden something anyone could tap into without much or any effort. And that's not the Force at all. And these changes didn't just ruffle a few feathers. You know, they fundamentally altered what made Star Wars what Star Wars was about, and not for the better. And yet people, despite the backlash, Kathleen Kennedy doubled down on this new direction. And instead of, just course correcting, Kathleen Kennedy went on ahead and continued to push the franchise further down this path, further alienating more and more fans along the way. Now, it's no wonder that the interest in Star Wars is actually being lost. And when the core of what made the franchise special is stripped away, exactly what is left? Now, I'm not saying that Star Wars shouldn't evolve. Every franchise needs to grow and adapt to stay relevant. But there's also a difference between evolution and erosion. And under Kathleen Kennedy, we've seen more of erosion. Okay, now the heart of soul of Star Wars was eroded by Kathleen Kennedy, replaced by a shallow imitation that lacks depth and resonance of the original. And that shows how creative Kathleen Kennedy is, as well as the inspiration she might have. So where exactly do we go from here? It's clear that something needs to be changed, and Kathleen Kennedy and her tenure has been marked by a lot of missteps and a lot of missed opportunities. Now, if Disney wants to actually go ahead and save Star Wars, they need to bring in fresh leadership, someone who actually understands the franchise's roots and can guide Star Wars back to what it made it great in the first place before Kathleen Kennedy came. Perhaps it's time to bring George Lucas back into the fold, even in a limited capacity, to help steer the ship. At the very least, Disney needs to start listening to the fans, the people who have kept this franchise alive for over 4 decades. All right. But doubtful that's going to happen anytime soon. But Kathleen Kennedy and her time at Lucasfilm has been a mixed bag, well, to say the least. While there have been like a few successes, the overall direction of the franchise under Kathleen Kennedy has been concerning. The cancellation of the Acolyte with Kathleen Kennedy is just the latest in the series of misfires that have plagued Star Wars under the watch of Kathleen Kennedy and under her leadership. But all is not lost. There's still time to turn things around, to restore Star Wars to its former glory, but that won't happen as long as Kathleen Kennedy remains in charge. Okay, so it's definitely time for a change. It's time for new leadership that respects the legacy of Star Wars and understands what it makes it special, and not just with the leadership, but with also the storyboard and other employees who decided to go ahead and cancel out Lucasfilm originality, as well as putting X's on the face of Luke Skywalker around the whole studio. So let me know your thoughts about this in the comments below. Also, be sure to include any additional thoughts you may have with this particular topic. If you enjoyed what I shared in this video, go ahead and smash the like button and share far and wide across social media. And if you haven't done so already and you enjoyed all the content that I put out there, go ahead, subscribe to the channel, click the bell notification so that way you're notified of future uploads and updates. Till then, peace.